of our attendees. Okay, I do see people coming in still quickly. Okay, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. So this is our webinar for today. We're going to be focused on talent management, key aspects of career planning. And I'm assuming that you guys can see my slide. Okay, we're using GoToWebinar this time, but hopefully you can see that fine. What we want to also cover today is what are some of the mechanisms that organizations are using to analyze the skill gaps to skills, and to analyze the skill gaps and see how exactly, how exactly they are being geared towards the career planning. And hopefully our panelists will be able to give the viewpoint of how the organizations are using it. Of course, ClayHR being more from an HCM technology provider perspective, we'll be looking at what the key building blocks are. Also talk about how the effective ways to fill those skill gaps and develop leaders are. We may not really get into the workforce acquisition side of things, but if we can cover these points here, I think that'll be great. And here's our distinguished panel for today. We have Jonty, Jonathan. Jonathan, I always call you Jonty, so hopefully you're okay with everyone calling Jonty as well. He's a director at HR Torque. Shirley, who is an award-winning HR and career coach, affiliated with quite a few organizations, and Nicky, who is the head of human resources at HR Torque as well. So please welcome the distinguished panel, so we can go ahead and ask them any questions and hopefully get their insights into how they see these things working. Just a very quick brief about ClayHR, which many of you are already familiar with. ClayHR is a comprehensive HR system. We have quite a few of the different HR solutions, so we'll cover it. I'll skip this slide here for a moment. Just a little bit about where the organizations are now. Of course, like we were saying, depending on the time of this webinar, you're most likely joining in from these areas over here, probably not here since it's already too late in those areas here. Okay, I'll skip this one and go right into this part here and ask our panelists the first question. So one of the first things, Jonty, I'll try to direct this question to you, but please, if Shirley and Nicky, if you guys have a point of view on this as well, please, as you know that this is a free-flowing webinar, please feel free to give your insights as well. But one of the first things, Jonty, that we see our customers asking us is around really is these concepts of the career pathway design. So as a background in ClayHR, you can kind of create all these career pathways, you can assign them to people, and then those career pathways then allow the employees to view their career trajectory, see what their next steps are. But one of the common thing that we hear, Jonty, from time to time is how exactly should these career pathways be created first of all. Now, of course, many customers simply look at their competitors, see how the other customers are doing it. But at the same time, that may not be the direct, what's good for my neighbor may not necessarily be good for me. So what do you see some of the key ideas here that the customers should be keeping into mind when they are generating these career pathways, because these are going to give the blueprints for their employees?
Thanks, Amrinder. So we have quite a bit of experience dealing with different corporates, and they have different perspectives on things. And I don't think anybody really gets this 100% right. So the way we tend to approach things is, like many things, if you want to get something right in a process in your organization, we look at getting the right system, the right process behind it, but then also making sure you've got the right people running the process. But also in the case of career planning, the thing that we often see missed is the people element. How do employees see this? And how do, if I show them that picture of what their career might look like, do they really understand it and what it means for them? And particularly in the big organizations, we find that our clients it's too much around, I've got to get this thing out, and they kind of get swamped by the numbers on the employees. So I think the particular challenges that we see as I go through this and talking about the pathways. So first challenge in the space, and I know this doesn't really answer your specific question around how do you develop these pathways, but the first challenge we see is around budget. Okay, so HR are told, no, you can't have a training facilitator, just find the tools and managers will look after it. We can't afford a specialist training person. and that becomes a little bit of a challenge for them because this gets lumped into the this is just something you have to do as another one of your processes, and go and find a way to get this career pathway mapped out. And I'll come back to that in a short while. The second challenge we see is around management training. Okay, so we've identified potential pathways, or what are the different roles that we have in the organization, and succession planning and how that might look at. But then we throw it back to management and we say, okay, well, management, for this particular employee, it's your job to now train this person and get them ready for that next role in 2 or 3 years' time. And we completely depend on management engaging and setting up that pathway and following through with the employee. And that creates a real challenge for us, because it might be we've got this pretty picture in the system of where this person might go, but if the manager is not engaging, the employee doesn't feel like they're ever going to get there. So it becomes just a piece of paper.
So that's interesting. So there are 3 key issues I think you already highlight there. Firstly, but I really like, Jonty, how you started this part here. The very first thing that you said is that, hey, nobody's going to get this 100% right. So I think that's a great starting point for us, because many times the organizations might simply dither away from not doing this with the concern that, hey, I'm not going to get this 100% right, but rather in a way that what you are saying here is that, hey, there's no expectation for somebody to get it right. You get it 100% right. There will be some components of the pathway that will be right, some components that you'll have to evolve over time, and it's not a one shot. It's not a one shot after all. Your career pathways are very much modifiable, and then you will add a layer, or you'll say, hey, these 2 layers just go together. That's perfectly fine. But besides that, you also pointed out that you have to keep the people specifically in mind. You have to get the manager buy-in, and sometimes there's no L&D leader that the organization is going to afford just at the time, so the HR person is then doing that part as well. So thank you for sharing that. I will share with you one part here, and then I'll ask you this question. And I'm back on the screen here. I want to see if you can see one of the things that the ClayHR provides is this simple import tenure history option, where you can kind of import a promotion data, and the system will just produce these pathways for you. The reason being that many people are much more comfortable being editors and critique rather than just writing it. ChatGPT has made it worse, probably. We just say, hey, you write it, I'll critique it, I'll make it mine, but you write it. So this is sort of the similar version of that, to say, okay, you have a past promotion data that somebody, you had a developer, and then they maybe became a senior software developer, and then somebody was an account manager, they became an account director. So just load that data, even if you have a spreadsheet or wherever you have it, and the system will generate those pathways. You have 1 million promotion data, that's good enough. You simply import it, the system will generate it. But do you see that particular capability being able to help out then? And Jonty, since you mentioned it, I'll just kind of come back to you for this question, and then I'll come to you, Nicky, as well.
So I haven't seen that capability before. I'd be very interested in looking at it, because I think sometimes the challenge with employees is they don't know where they want to go to. So, if you have that sort of map of, okay, well, this is how you get to this position, and you've got a couple of interlapping things, and you can say to an employee, look, these are some options for you. Actually, I think it becomes a much more interesting conversation with the employee, because they can go, well, I don't want that role. And then you're going, okay, well, these are the alternatives, but this is more where you need to move in terms of your skill set. Then that actually becomes an interesting conversation with them if you can kind of do a juxtaposition of those various different opportunities. I think the other interesting one is the question we often get from employees is, so what? So I've got these different things. What am I actually learning in those different roles, and why is it that I need those different things before I get to that top role? So by having that map, I think you're in a better position to be able to have that conversation than you might have been in the past, where they were going, I just want to be the CEO. Okay,
Yes.
Well, why don't you just hire me now? I'm definitely worth it.
I'm here, I'm ready. Just let's just do this. That's great. Nicky, and I'll ask you as well the same thing, because I'm sure you share you have your own perspective on how you see this thing working out. So this capability can provide some leg up, but at the same time, the organization is still going to have to review it and kind of make it their own.
Yeah, so I certainly think that it would be very useful, because I do think that a lot of the time, especially when, as Jonty said, you don't have a whole department that is dealing with this, a dedicated, people that are there, that is their only function, and often it falls to the HR person, and possibly you don't even have an HR person, but somebody who is now responsible for making this all happen. And very often when you look back, you can't see where you've come from. So if you had the capability that you could take the history, I think it would be a really good starting point to be able to give yourself almost a blueprint of where did, what succeeded, what didn't succeed, and be able to put that in the system to be able to manipulate it in terms of what works and what doesn't work. So I definitely think it would be something that would be hugely useful.
Got it. And I think I love the idea of how you just called it your blueprint and your, sort of the high level roadmap, the milestone journey, because I think that it is critical for HR to be able to plan out this milestone journey, not only for, for the benefit of the employees, and not only for helping manage their tasks, but really also for upward management. Because many times the executive management comes and asks the HR saying, hey, we want to be able to see what exactly have we accomplished, and then you're kind of scrambling to, because the work that gets finished immediately gets into the, oh, that's already done pile, and the work that's left already stays on top of our mind. But having this milestone visualization to say, okay, hey, we said we were going to do these 4 things over the year, and look, we have already accomplished those 3 things. Sure, they're done now, but they took effort, they took time, and we have been able to accomplish. So I think I like that. I like that idea very much. And just in case you joined, and I really glad to see the very significant turnout here. Quite a few people joined actually just in the last few minutes. If you join, we got started actually right on time. So please, it's helpful for everyone to get started. And we have just pretty much covered the first segment of it. I'm about to launch the first poll. So if you can please go ahead and take a moment to address it. Also, besides the poll here, you should be able to, I'll give everyone maybe 30 seconds or so to answer it so we can keep moving. And I hope you see the poll right in front of your screen and you're able to answer it. Okay, I see that some responses started to come in, so I guess it is working for at least some. And then maybe I'll give people 15 more seconds if it took some time to. Oh, I see quite a few responses coming in now. Oh, so I'm gonna share the results as well as soon. I don't know if the software already does it, but I'll be happy to report what a lot of people are saying. And really great to see all this turnout. We're close to 100 people, so that's great. And besides the poll, you should also have a way to ask questions as well. So if you have questions, you don't need to wait till the end. You're welcome to ask questions early, and I'm sure some of our team members will be able to pick up and hopefully collate the questions go there. Okay, maybe 5 more seconds for the poll. If you would like to address it, answer it, please go ahead and answer it. We're almost at 60% participation now. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're closing it. All right. So does it show you the results, or do you want me to read it out to you? Okay, I'll just read it out here. So 37% said that the biggest challenge is actually the retaining top talent. Another 30% said essentially developing, promoting employees. Sorry, second one was managing the distributed workforce, almost with 30% as well. And only 6% said identifying top talent here. Okay, thank you for taking the time to take that poll. We'll keep moving. The next question I have, So one of the things that I'll come to the skill matrix later, but let's suppose we look at the context from one employee, and the question was going to be for Shirley, since Shirley and I was just talking about it 2 days ago, but I see that I think as one of the panelists, maybe she's having some difficulty joining. So I'll ask you as well, Nicky, and then Jonty, of course, you're welcome to chime in as well. But the specific question that we were asking was a little bit of a psychology question that sometimes appears as an HR question, but there are quite a few different regional factors here at play as well that I want to understand. So when we're looking at, and hopefully you can all see my screen, I'm just showing the career pathway from the context of one employee, the career pathway that's assigned to her. So Ellen is currently the director of HR at this organization. This is the journey that she has already taken, and her next step is this. Now, not only can she see the next step within the system, but she can also see how far she is from being able to get there, specifically from a skills perspective. So it's possible that many of the skills she already has, which are going to be like Jonty, I think you were saying that, hey, I'm ready to be hired as a CHRO, so hire me now. This could probably be some part here where she is ready. So she has achieved the target level, but some parts where there is some work to be done here. So there, the system also shows the recommendations on what exactly, how exactly can she get there? That you're currently at 6, you want to get to 9. You can either take this training or you can talk to all of these people. And similarly, you can do for each of your gaps and identify on how you want to essentially be able to get there. So you can see, okay, this is my next step, but to take my next step, I want to cover through here, take this journey here. So Jonty, how do you see this kind of thing working? Do you think that sometimes it may, because the specific psychology question in my mind is that, is it motivating for some people? Is it demotivating for other people? How can the organization strike a balance here in being very clear about, hey, saying this is how you have, what kind of check-ins then the manager should conduct with the employees to help them? How do you see this working out?
So Amrinder, in my experience, if I look at the particular one that you were showing there, I think the biggest challenge with it is it doesn't show, it's kind of, you move from HR manager to HRD and it looks like just a simple step and to a CHRO. But there's so many commercial things that one needs to learn before you can take those steps up. And so I think one of the things that we often see missed is in that skills assessment below there is, yeah, you got problem solving, but there's things like common sense. There's things like ability now to be a leader in the organization and have commercial acumen, which may not necessarily be required so much in your HR manager, but definitely are required in your HR director role. So there's almost a step up process, but so think of it as an exponential gap between certain roles in the organization, and it's how do you build that into the skills assessment, and actually how do you test people with that?
Yeah, so
how do you put them in that position where maybe they're now heading up a region where they have to take real responsibility
for the P&L,
and as a result of that, they really show they've got the acumen to step up to the next level. And I think that's often missed in these sort of simplified pictures, and it's key for HR to be communicating that to the person to say, look, this, to get to that level, these are the types of things that you need to show us, and this is how we're going to try and test you.
Right. So that's a great segue that will also be in our next part as well, because I think what you're really referring to there, Jonty, is, and I like the step that you have taken at it, is that for some of these pivotal skills, it may actually be very difficult to assess them. It may be, how do you really see that somebody's going to be an 8 and they need to be at 9 if they have never really done the P&L for a region? How are you going to be able to assess that here? So I like that idea. Now, granted, the software is only, like we say, the software is only part of the equation. It's going to provide you with a framework, but clearly what you are giving is what the HR's blueprint is going to be used, is going to use such a tool and then make it actually worthwhile for the employees to actually execute. I love that. Love that.
So if I could just add to that, Amrinder, I mean, it's like a lot of the things we see with the tools we use these days. They were developed in the 70s and 80s when people were trying to box things into a certain category. But in your organization, they're great tools to try and collect the data. But the real success is how we apply that to the individual.
Yeah.
And that's also the hard part, because I've seen people leave not because they haven't been given the responsibility, but they just didn't get the title.
Yeah.
So because they weren't being told that they were now head of this particular thing, they left because they thought the title meant everything. Meanwhile, they were doing the job, and they were getting the kudos and the responsibility, and you know, the organization saw them as a high potential and had them in the plan, but they just didn't have the title. So, and that was about the individual's perception of things.
Right. That's interesting. So sometimes the title is, so that's, I think they're always, the HR world is filled with anecdotes like that, and I'm sure, Nicky, you have a ton to share along those as well. But I think, and yes, you know, a lot of the software was built in 60s and 70s, and we, you know, I can totally attest to the fact, because as ClayHR, we sometimes are asked to integrate with this software and that software, and when we look at that software, we're like, oh my God, what exactly is this thing? So it's running on a blue screen, and it still works on a but that's the HR world. There are a lot of artifacts there. But Nicky, how do you approach this thing here? Because while, you know, the purpose of the software is to kind of give, like, you know, some sort of a framework here, but what are some of the best practices that you think that the HR team members can use to make this, after all, this kind of tool successful and the adoption good, so that the employees can benefit and take the next step here?
So I think, thanks very much. I think for me, there's two very different sides of this, and you know, often what will happen is employers will utilize a tool, expecting that when they use this tool, that all of a sudden every single employee is going to want to do it. And I think as HR managers, as business owners, we also need to realize that not everybody is going to want to do it. So we can make these fancy things, but there's also the person inside of there that's not going to want to do that. So that's the employee side of things. I think more than that, though, in terms of making something like this work, is, you know, from a management perspective. So the people that are driving this thing forward, you can get people that will put the data in, that will update the data, that will do those things, but it's got to be driven by management. It's got to be driven by the manager, the line manager, by the HR department. And unless we create a culture within the organization that this is not just a box ticking exercise that we do once a year to see, have you got to your 100%? Did you get to your 80%? Have you got these 4 skills? And we tick we tick the box and we say, yes, I've done my job. I need to do this so I can get my increase or my bonus or whatever it is. We as managers, almost, and as HR, have to create a culture where employees start to see the value in wanting to grow and develop, not necessarily just so that they can, you know, say that they've got there, but is to create a space where the line manager is saying, we actually need to sit and do this. I need to update this because that blueprint is not working for me here. So it's creating a culture within the organization where people want to do this. I mean, we have within business, we have people that will do recons every month religiously. It is part of their job. They will do stock control. They do all of these things, but this seems to be an aspect, the people part of things, where it falls by the wayside because we get too busy. There's other important things, but the people are actually the thing that we use the most. And in any other sort of environment, we would make sure that we spend a huge amount of time making sure that those people are working. And so I think if we were going to make something like this work, which does work really well, we have to create that culture of our managers and our line managers and our, you know, management team creating that want and that drive to push this thing forward. That's, you know, just from my experience and what I've seen.
I think those kinds of insights are exactly, Nicky, why so many of us think that you are the webinar superstar, because those exactly the kinds of things that you share there. That's exactly the kind of thing I think we see that the HR managers having to really in a way struggle with, because the technology might be there, but then to distinguish the human behind it, to say, okay, hey, we're going to have to eventually deal with the human here. That's I think that's exactly is where the large part of the battle might be. So I think that's great. I don't think that the technology is set out to have to solve each of those psychological, and I think the way you put it as a motivation slash the drive, I think you use the word drive there, to it's not supposed to be going to be able to solve all of those issues, but at least if the line managers are able to use this thing to then have that honest conversation with their employees, I think that can perhaps be the right stepping stone here for them for that particular organization to get into their own HR maturity. Then I think I was going to go into the skill matrix discussion here first, but then because we have just talked about it, this part here, about the question of drive, I want to then go into this territory here, which essentially is when Ellen looks at this, the same, here what I'm showcasing is, hopefully you can see the screen up with the orange background here, because here Ellen is logged into her own profile and she's looking at her career plan and she's looking at her next steps, and she can see something similar that we reviewed together, the recommendations, etc. But she can also see the system's recommendations, and she can also explore. She says, hey, what if I don't want to become the next level that sort of is being suggested to me, but I want to just explore, and maybe I want to change careers here. And I frequently see this, and then the system can say, okay, if you want to be this, sure, you can do that, but then you may not be a match for that at all right now, because you don't necessarily have those skills that particular thing needs. So it might be kind of stepping as a new thing altogether. Similarly, if you want to suddenly switch into technology, then you may not have this skill at all, so you might have to go into a different different learning pathway here. But overall, we see this as a recommendation component here, or the exploration component here, quite a little bit of a controversial topic, because some organizations are comfortable with their employees being able to explore, saying, okay, go ahead, explore anything you want. Some organizations will like, hey, let's slow down here and make sure that the employees don't get into trouble and say, yes, I want to be that, because that seems like really fun. The grass is always greener on that side, because that team is always having parties, and but you of course cannot see from this, sitting on this team, the hard work that goes behind the scenes before the party, and it's hard to see that. And it's hard to see the boring stuff while you're on the other side. You can see only the fun stuff when they say, yes, we did that, but what was it? What was the slog fest before that, right? So I don't know what you guys, I understand it's a controversial topic around career exploration. Some organizations are embrace it fully, but some organizations are a little bit more conservative around that. How do you handle that?
It's a tough one to manage. My personal view is I like the exploration, because it immediately means that individual, and I don't mean about exploration for the next role. I'm talking about the person who's prepared to look at their 10-year plan and say, I might want to do something completely different. For me, that means that person is giving some real thought to their life and their career, which actually sets them apart. Purely a personal perspective. So I quite like that. But I do know that then trying to manage it within the organization is a difficult one. So I definitely don't have the panacea on how to look after it. But I think that in the right context, it should be encouraged. Because the key thing is, it's if you start asking the questions about the 10-year, and I want to move into that space, it then starts the conversation of, well, what other skill sets do you need to have to get there? And if that person is really committed and they show that they're quite prepared to learn those skill sets, and it's not just a case of, oh, well, it's your job, you must give me all that stuff. I mean, you know, if they prepare to take the initiative, then it's a great thing. You know, as long as it's not just handed to them on a platter. Personal view.
But thank you, Jonty, for having the disclaimer at the end. So Jonty is basically saying that all of the HR Talk customers don't have to necessarily subscribe to that view, but the ones that do, they perhaps can take all the you know, the benefits that you pointed out can come from it, but and you also mean it in a broader context, not just in the next step, but overall from my life and journey perspective. Nicky, how do you approach this rather sticky point here?
So I think my personal view is possibly you know, more aligned to Jonty's, which is I believe an organization that encourages people to grow and develop and know where they're supposed to be going, creates an organization, one where you have people that are going to do more than and grow and to do a number of different things, as opposed to someone who just sits and never wants to achieve anything more. The challenge in that is that you do create a space where you have individuals that will probably at some point decide to leave, which is where I think the fear comes in, is that if you teach people that they can be better and grow and develop and be more than what they are today, at some point they probably will leave you. So, you know, for me, I think it's a really great thing. I do agree with what Jonty is saying, is that, you know, I'm very happy to grow and develop everybody, but, you know, I'm not going to give you everything on a silver platter. But, you know, my sense is that if you create an organization that wants to grow and develop people, you'll most of the time create an organization with people that will, you know, do so many more things and help your own organization develop into different things, new initiatives. Whereas if you put everybody in a box and you never show them what more there is out there, that's pretty much what you're going to get. But again, that's just me.
I mean, see, that concept of that people being afraid about, hey, if somebody employee does really well, they could grow faster than the organization. I think that step is always there. I mean, nothing is really static anyway. Again, I think we're all, because this is a somewhat of a sticky point, we're all sharing our personal opinions, but at least in that context, I say that, hey, much better for everybody that the employee goes very, very, very well, as opposed to employee doesn't grow. So whatever the repercussions are, fine, because nothing is going to stay static. The organization is growing. Sometimes the organization is growing faster. It's not that the employee is not growing, but the organization has its own maturity, is growing extremely fast, and the employee, even while growing, may be left behind. And similarly, the employee sometimes may grow very fast and the organization is not changing, then the organization might be left behind. I think these are all possible scenarios, of course, but the growth should happen. I think by itself, growth should happen. I think, again, that's my personal opinion, but I don't think there's anything very debatable in that part. That's what should happen. Okay, so I switched this thing here, but this does allow me to launch this poll here first. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this one. This time I did see that there was a share results button, which I hadn't done last time, so I had to read it out. But this time I'll be able to do that. So please, this time, hopefully you can do the poll faster than last time, so we can quickly move on to our next and the final segment here. So we can stick to our 40 to 45 minute timeline that we had drawn. So the poll is now open. Please go ahead and answer it right away, and I'll give people, okay, I see the results starting to come in, but go ahead and please take the polls right away so that I can close it in maybe next 20 seconds or so, and then we can move on to the final segment. So the poll should be open. Please go ahead and take it right now. Okay, I see more results coming in, now, more results. So this time I do see that there's a share button, so I'll be able to share that as soon as we finish the poll here. So there's a few, maybe we'll give it for 10 more seconds. So please go ahead and answer any. Okay, 10 seconds, 9, 8, 7, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close the poll now. Hopefully you had a chance to share it. And this time I'm sharing the results, so you can probably see that this time. So as you can see, most of the people are thinking along the best measurement of the effectiveness of their talent management strategy is around the succession planning and leadership development programs, tied with the employee performance metrics. Very few people are going with the employee satisfaction surveys, but more people are going with the retention rates. So that's interesting. I'm not sure it is outright surprising to me, but it is still. So I go ahead, hide results, right? Okay. Hopefully you all had a chance to see the results. It's not outright shocking to me, but I wouldn't have been able to predict it either. That a lot of people say that the satisfaction surveys are not a good way to, or not a very good way to measure that, where rather people are looking at the succession planning, the performance metrics, even retention rates higher than the satisfaction survey. So thank you for everyone who took the poll. I'm going to go on to the last point here today. The last point here is really goes into, and hopefully you can see my screen again. We're talking about the skill matrix and some of the specific capabilities in this regard. Before we ask the question here to the panel, is some of the things that people can do is the skill matrix, of course, allows you to track your skills against your employees. You can create your set of skills, your sets of skills that are basically driven by these skill types and skill categories, the people. And then based on that, you can create these views. And by views, what we mean is really that, the HR is typically going to be looking at the HR skills, technology team is on the technology skill, and the sales team members are going to be looking at the sales team members on the sales related skills. You don't compare the marketing team on the sales skills, etc. So those views essentially allow you to have a particular snippet into the application that specifically looks at a set of people, a set of corresponding skills selected by the skill type or skill category, etc. And then, of course, you can do more fun things like look at your 2x2 or your 3x3 matrix, etc., and see, okay, this is where somebody sits on where exactly they should be, and if you want to move things around, you can move things around. So that's all the core capabilities in the ClayHR system, the skill matrix, the 2x2, the 3x3 kind of things here. But one of the key questions that we ask our customers, and vice versa, customers do ask us, is what are some of the key ways to make sure that this skill matrix is a living document? Because too often somebody can take a snapshot one time, and then if they don't have the other automations enabled, which ClayHR does power, for example, when you take a training, the skill should automatically update when you receive a feedback, when you complete a performance review, etc. While those automations are there, we often see that many of the automations are not turned on by the customers because there's some fear of letting go, that should we allow the system to modify these skills without me as the HR coming in, even though there are proper checks and balances, etc. So some organizations will do that, some won't. But the underlying question, I think, behind all this is still the same. How do we make sure that this kind of skill matrix remains relevant? It remains a living document. It doesn't just become like a set and forget kind of thing here. Whoever would like to go first, I'm interested in hearing all.
No, I'm happy to. I think Amrinder, from my perspective, it's we've got to remember where we came from. Okay, so the traditional method was, and particularly in mid-sized organizations, is HR would gather information for a specific ExCo meeting where line managers or the ExCo members would talk to the people that they thought were superstars. But it was very subjective. I like Nicky, she's fantastic at this, etc. So Nicky's my superstar. Okay, but it talked to a person's or the manager's perception of those individuals. And I don't like Jonty, he's lazy, don't get on with him, etc., etc. So where we've developed to and where the system is very helpful is it creates this more factual base for then having that same conversation, because you still need to have that conversation. You need to say, listen, this is what these facts are telling us about these people and their capabilities. Do we still think that it's accurate? Is it touching the right points? Have we got the right skills? To a point I made earlier, Jonty's sitting in that high potential thing, but there just lacks commercial sense. When I asked him to go and do this project, if it wasn't for Nicky helping him, he wouldn't have done anything. Yet I know he's good at studying, he can do all those other things, and he looks good from a skills perspective, but he's missing that tangible thing. So we've got to test him to see, can he get there, or is he just going to be a technical expert and fit into a different box? And so you still need to have that conversation, but at least you're doing it with facts. So I think from that perspective, we've moved on. It's never going to be perfect. It's dealing with people. It still has to have the people element, but it gives us much more support around that.
Yeah. That's good. And Nicky, while you respond, I'll also start to look at the questions coming from the audience and take this as well. But Nicky, I'll give you the time to respond first.
Thanks. So I think for me is just going back to what I said in the beginning is, we need to remember that it's just a system, and a system can't drive us forward. So in terms of making sure that this works, is that as the management team and as the organization, we need to make this a living, breathing system. It needs to be moving and changing. It needs to be something that we are driving, and we're driving forward. And we're asking line managers, have you done this? And if they haven't done it, is to manage it accordingly, but is pushing it forward. Because for me, until we get people, because people want to make the system do it. They don't want to have the hard conversations. They don't want to say, Jonty, you're not doing very well in this area. So they want the system to do this. So they put it all in the system and they expect it all to happen, but they forget that there's another side of things. So, we can't make the system manage our staff. And so the system is there in order to enable us to do it. As Jonty is saying, it's very factual, it's black and white. It's not a feeling thing, but then we as management need to create a culture where we're saying to line managers, whoever, this is living and breathing. You need to use it. You need to make sure it's happening, and then holding them accountable when it's not done. This is not just a once-a-year document. That's just, for me, because it just gets pushed aside because there's a system.
Yeah.
Amrinder, if I can just echo Nicky, you won't believe how often we get clients who go, I'm getting a system that's going to solve everything.
Yeah.
And it can't. It's one part of the equation.
Yeah. So sometimes when people ask us this, like, will the system solve all of our things? I said, yes, we'll pack in the person with it, and then yes, but you need to have, without the CHRO and the HR leadership, the system is going to be a system. But unless you're going to be able to drive it and drive the adoption, the system is going to provide you with a great platform, but you will still need your own intellect and force to do it. So we have quite a few questions. I know we are at 46, but the time has just flown here. But very quickly, I want to get to this question here. Oh, questions are still coming in. We may not be able to get through all of them, but we'll try to get as many as we can here. So let's jump right into it. So Samuel's asking this question about essentially around retaining top talent and how much the market hype is creating an issue with that. And Ethan asked the same question, even though Ethan, I think you phrased this as a statement, but I still see the question or the pain point there. How do you really address this thing? So I think this question was probably extremely relevant in 2022. 2023 might have become a little bit less relevant, but it's still very much on that, with the market hype, sometimes retaining the top talent just becomes an issue just because there's just so much hype in the market around the market. I think specifically what's being asked is the labor market, right? I don't know if you guys would like to take this. It's a difficult one, but that's what we see here.
Well, look, I mean, I clearly don't have the solution, and it varies from region to region, but there's no doubt that clients have been struggling to get the right people through the door. But I think to a certain extent, some of our clients have also been a little bit more robust in the processes that they run to get the right people. Okay, they've recognized the cost of getting it wrong, and so we're seeing a lot more of them doing full batteries of psychometric tests and running a proper, thorough process where before 2020 they might not have done that. So I think there's that element as well. Where we've seen things, I think because it's harder, you've got to be a little bit smarter about who you approach and how you approach and the skill set you're trying to get. And you need to assume it will take you longer than you anticipated, but I think you could still get there.
Yeah.
But somebody who's telling you, oh, just go and hire somebody overnight, I want to fill this position, that's a tough call.
Yeah. So I want to take on the next question here, very interesting, from Dr. Usmanu. So Dr. Usmanu, I'm going to try to repeat the entire question. I think I understand the gist of the question. Maybe I'll just paraphrase it here, but essentially the situation is generic, that a technician was, let's suppose, working for an organization. While they're working, they get themselves with their next educational degree that they didn't have when they had started. Now they see that there's a position open, they apply for that position inside the organization, so they are kind of internal to the organization, but the employer keeps them where they are and hires a new person from outside. And Dr. Usmanu is asking around, how should they, again, I'm paraphrasing the question here, the last part, but how should the employer should have done it, and how do you view, this particular situation, I guess.
Give that one to Nicky.
So yeah, I do think that the difficulty there is, if you're going to create a space in which you're going to allow people the opportunity to grow and develop, we're creating a space where people know that there are positions coming available, giving it to an external person, does create a space where your staff are now going to distrust you. It's going to create general unhappiness within the workplace. So if you're going to give it to an external person, it's really important that the reason why the person didn't get the job. So my questions would be, were they able to go for an interview, or were they just looked over? So they weren't even considered. Very often they're not considered because I like you where you are and I don't actually want to move you. Now that is just going to create a general, culture within your organization where people will be unhappy. So it's not a good practice. So there's a number of different things, but if you're going to create that space where the person has the ability to apply, if they don't get the job, then you need to be very clear why they were not employed, because otherwise you just create general unhappiness.
So Dr. Usmanu, hopefully you're
and if you made a mistake, go and speak to them and apologize. I mean, it's just it's a human thing. Mistakes do happen, even in big organizations that maybe it should.
You have actually, in fact, reinforced the point very well. I mean, Jonty, but even what Nicky had already said, I think that's already. So Dr. Usmanu, hopefully you took that answer away. I think even though Nicky left a little wiggle room for the employer later on, she said, okay, there is maybe, depending on, we have to see where there's a process flaw, but otherwise, really the answer going into. We have two more questions. I'm going to try to answer it, and I think probably that's where we'll have to end for today. So I think there's a similar question here from Sharon. And Anita, I think you asked something about skill matrix, but I'm not sure if I could get the gist of the question. I think the question here is, maybe it's the same question that I think, Jonty, you pointed out earlier, around the question really is, these pivotal skills, some of these skills, how do we know somebody's at 6 versus somebody's at 7? And before I even leave it for Jonty and Nicky to address, I'll mention one part to it. That while yes, your question is really sort of spot on, and those questions should be addressed, but in practice often we don't see that that's not the big question, because maybe there's it's a continuum between 0 and 10, whether somebody is at a 6 or at a 7. Some of these pivotal skills, some of these skills even non-pivotal skill. Let's suppose we are even talking about software programming or something like that, a specific language. People will have variations on a day-to-day basis. Some days you talk to them and you're like, oh my God, you're really at a 6. And some days you're like, hey, you're doing very well. So we'll all have our ups and downs. So that's one aspect of it. But very rarely will you mistake somebody from 0 to 10 or something. So practically speaking, we would rather suggest that not look at those minute differences, but look at the bigger picture to say, hey, somebody has come from 0 to 3 to 6 to 9. Even if that 6 was, like you're saying, controversially, maybe it was really a 7. It's not, that's not the big picture thing here. The big picture is that is there growth or there isn't growth. That's just how I'll address one part of it, but Jonty, Nicky will definitely take your inputs as well. And that'll be the last question we'll have to take for today.
I think the best analogy I can suggest, Amrinder, is if we take this too literally, it would imply that the CEO is perfect.
Yeah.
And nobody's perfect. Nobody. You know, the CEO will have gaps. They'll have certain things that they're good at, and the same thing with the CFO and the HR, the CHRO, and all the rest. Yeah. The question for me sometimes in these look in the pivotal skills is, if I look back at my career or any of the senior people that I've worked with, there's always been a point in time that somebody's bet on them, and they've gone into a position where actually on paper they may not have all the skills, and they had to work through that. And so the question becomes, in your organization, how do you test your people to see whether they can make that big leap? And I know in some of the bigger organizations like the Unilevers, etc., that's the reason they like to move people from one country to the next, because they want to see, how do you do in a different culture? How do you do in a different department? Do you have the capabilities internally as an individual to be able to cope with those differences?
Yeah.
And now, like in smaller businesses, you don't have the luxury of moving people to different countries, but you've still got the ability to move them into spaces where they're outside their comfort zone, and they can bring out those capabilities and shine, or they can show that actually they're more comfortable maybe as a technical expert rather than as a leader, or a leader in a different context.
Nicky, if you would like to have the final word on this, and then we'll try to wrap up.
So I think I agree with both of you, is that, in trying to establish, if we're looking at a point difference doesn't really mean anything. If we're looking at I think you're a 3, but someone's rated you a 7, well, there's different things that you can put in place, which I think your system allows. Is things like assessments. It's people looking at that person, assessing that person, doing on the job sort of assessments. But I think if we're looking at point differences, I wouldn't really worry too much about that. I don't think there's a huge amount in it.
That's right. Okay, I think we're all reinforcing those ideas there, that look at the big picture there. So I just want to give a great round of thanks to all the people who joined, and specifically to our panelists here, Jonty, Nicky, and it appears that Shirley had difficulty joining. She was in the prep call before and she wasn't able to join, but we will see her again at the next one. And we want to give great thanks to Jonty and Nicky for sharing their insights so transparently. I think all the questions that we were able to get to today. Now, all the audience members, if you did not have your question answered, I think that 2 came in after I had taken the cutoff, and we're quite at time as well. But please feel free to ask through and I want to also thank the ClayHR staff who helped organize this thing. So they will be receiving your questions, anything that you did not get to today. So please feel free to ask, and they'll be able to, if not in this one, they'll be able to follow up or perhaps seed the next webinar with those questions already, so we can address them going forward. So thank you very much, everyone. We'll try to give people at least 2 minutes back on their clock today.